So what do you do when you're purchasing a vacation rental property that has existing bookings on the calendar, right? So let's set the stage. You are the purchaser, and maybe you're working with me to help you buy a cabin in the North Georgia mountain market. And you come across this property and you find out before you make the offer or while you're under contract that the current seller has 6 months of bookings on the Airbnb calendar, right? So they run this cabin on Airbnb. It's doing pretty well. You want to buy it because you love it and you think it has potential to be a profitable short-term rental investment, and you plan to run it on Airbnb as well. So we're going to walk through that scenario. I'm going to break that down a little bit, and just by way of introduction, before we get into it, my name is Connor Cushman, and I am in the North Georgia real estate market. So the big towns are Blue Ridge, Ellijay, Dahlonega, Helen, Jasper, Talking Rock, Dawsonville, Big Canoe, just to name a few. Morganton, Mineral Bluff are in there as well. That gets lumped into Blue Ridge. So I wanted to show you one of my listings here in Blue Ridge, Georgia. This is a seller who currently runs the property as a short-term rental, and they've got bookings on Airbnb. They came to me and said, "Hey, we want to sell." I actually think this is a pretty good value and a good opportunity for someone to come in, add some nice decor and updates, and make it just another level better with additional amenities and games and attraction to make this property do 50 to 60K pretty comfortably a year, and make this a good rental property for someone. So with that in mind, I want to jump into that scenario, and maybe the reason why you stumbled on this video is you find yourself in a situation where you're purchasing this property, but there's existing bookings on the calendar. So a couple of ways that this has happened, and keep in mind that I'm not necessarily advocating for you to do anything that violates Airbnb's terms. So double check that. Depending on when you're watching this video, that may or may not apply, and you may be breaking Airbnb terms by doing anything that I suggest here. So just double check that first. None of this is, of course, like legal advice or anything like that. Just experience as someone who sells, manages, and invests in a bunch of short-term rentals. So with that in mind, again, my core role is a realtor in North Georgia, transacting vacation rental properties. And so I come across this scenario quite a bit, and there's a couple of different ways to handle it, but the most common solution is to have the seller, while you're under contract, and once you're kind of past your key contingency period. So, right, you go under contract, you go through the due diligence period, you get through the financing and appraisal period, and you're kind of in this lull for generally a week or two at least before close date. And that's a good time once you're past all the contingencies and it's looking like, hey, this is going to close. Seller and buyer both agree that there's not really anything that would get in the way of this closing. Now we get this part of the process going of transferring the bookings. And so what you do as the buyer is you start to draft your Airbnb listing. And then you request from the seller a list, a spreadsheet of sorts, of all of the names, dates, and rates for the upcoming bookings that are on their listing, right? So then they send you that list, and they don't have to give you away anything that would be considered personal information or not something that they would be allowed to share with you. But you're just using that data and spreadsheet as a reference point for when those guests reach out to you on your listing. And so then right around the time that you're closing, either, a couple days before because they're ready to shut things down and transfer over to you, or generally this happens kind of on the day of closing or right after closing, you go ahead and they deactivate their listing and you activate your listing. And then when they deactivate their listing, the existing bookings that are still on the calendar are still treated as normal bookings. And so those bookings are still there, and the ability to communicate with those upcoming guests is still there. The sellers will send a message to those guests and say, hey, we've actually sold this cabin, but the buyers have agreed to honor the booking terms. And so here's the link to the listing, or here's how you find the listing. Go ahead and send them a message and tell the new owners that you're reaching out to book your same dates, and they have your dates and reference point, something along those lines, right? So then you have your your calendar, and you might not be ready to like take bookings from the masses, and you probably don't have your listing set up to be taking in bookings because you want to give these people an opportunity to rebook first, right? And so you're going to have your listing activated, but probably set your nightly pricing to $6,000 or $10,000 a night, so that no one actually can book. And or you maybe have your pricing right, but you just set the setting that anyone that wants to book has to request before, so there's no instant booking. So that way you can make sure that these existing guests or existing bookings have the first opportunity to get their dates back, right? And so then you say, to the sellers like, hey, they have 2 or 3 days before I'm going to open up the calendar. And so then you wait for those messages to come in, right? And depending on how many it is and what the guest preferences are, your hit rate on that might be good or might not be, right? But generally, a good percentage of those existing bookings are just going to rebook on your listing. So I'm going to flip it to the seller side now. And if you are a seller in this scenario, so my seller is under contract, and the buyer, and by the way, you can negotiate that this is either a requirement of the contract as a seller, or same for you, buyer, right? You could potentially negotiate that you want all the bookings if you know that there's a lot. In most cases, the cleanest thing to do is, as a buyer, is probably not honor the upcoming bookings, because you don't really know the price or the terms that the current seller has set for these bookings. And you're kind of creating a friction moment for that guest where they might feel frustrated and maybe slightly more inclined to leave you a bad review after their stay. And so it's not necessarily something that you want to do as a buyer, but it's certainly scenarios where it makes a ton of sense to want it as a buyer. So you just kind of need to determine that as you're maybe writing the offer. And that's something, obviously someone like myself can advise on. But as the seller, again, you may or may not want to require that the bookings are honored. Maybe you have a brand that you need to protect, or certain types of bookings or groups that are coming where it's very sensitive, and those bookings really need to be honored, or it's a principal thing for you. And so you can certainly try to negotiate that. Many times we get into the contract without really clarifying that, just because it's not particularly important to either party or the party that I'm representing. And therefore we'll just kind of feel it out during the contract period, right? So, but again, let's say you're the seller and the buyer says, hey, we'd be happy to honor the existing bookings, and you're open to doing that. So you're going to do just kind of the inverse. You're going to provide that booking, the booking and reservation information to the buyers. And then you're on the day of closing. And as the seller, you kind of want to wait until the day of closing or after, so that the property has sold. You wouldn't want to do this too early, cancel the bookings, and then not close for whatever reason. So you don't really want to celebrate or burn the boats until the boat has not a great metaphor, but you get the point. So with that in mind, you close, you get the wire hitting your account from the sale, and then you go ahead and send the message to the existing guests. And so you create a template, and you say, hey, guest, I just want to inform you that we've sold this property, but the new owners have agreed to honor your booking and the rate and terms of the booking. And so here's the Airbnb link, and you need to go ahead and rebook with them. Now, I've done this without involving Airbnb support and regretted it. And so what you actually want to do before you send this message, and I apologize for kind of forgetting this step, is you actually want to reach out to Airbnb support, and you want to let them know, hey, we've sold this property, and we would like your help in canceling all of the upcoming reservations penalty free. And so you provide the closing disclosure. You send it to the Airbnb support rep, and they'll get you connected to the right person if you let them know that's what you're trying to do. And then they will automatically cancel without any penalty all of the upcoming reservations. And they'll do that, and they won't provide any context to the guests. And so you'll have a lot of angry guests. And so you kind of want to be ready for that moment, and then send that message right away. and just say, hey, this is the situation, but and then you kind of provide them the good news because they're freaking out about the cancellation, and you say, hey, no worries, the new owners are going to honor the booking, and then provide them the link, and again, they can go book with the new owners, and in some cases they'll just book whatever they want, right? So that is it's actually pretty smooth from the seller's perspective. Like I said, I've tried to do it without the help of Airbnb, and then there's just a lot of friction because by default the guests kind of don't trust you, or kind of confused or concerned or think it's a scam or whatever, which is understandable. And so it's best as a seller to just go straight to Airbnb, have them do it. You're not gonna, then you don't have to deal with any penalties, because what you definitely don't want to do as an owner is cancel the bookings without, like, worst case scenario, if Airbnb can't help you for whatever reason, then the next best thing to do would be to have the guest cancel on their end and issue a full refund. You never want to be the one initiating the cancellation on your end, and subjecting yourself to penalties, both financial penalties, but also like listing and account penalties and all that jazz. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. So just go straight to Airbnb support, and then you should be in the clear there. So that is the gist of buying or selling an Airbnb or a short-term rental with Airbnb bookings. I focused specifically on the Airbnb side of things. The process for Vrbo is pretty similar. It tends to not be as much of a meaningful number of bookings, or not as relevant part of the conversation for most listings, but the same principles apply, and the same motion is probably, more or less the process on the Vrbo side. It's not something that you see as commonly. So, and then direct bookings would be their own kind of thing. Another situation that you'll run into is, and maybe more common, is that you're dealing with a property management company. And so as a seller, you want to make sure you understand the terms of your property management agreement, and what sort of notice you need to provide to the property management company prior to selling, and what you're on the hook for as a seller. Because what you don't want to do is get into a contract and the buyer is closing in 2 weeks, and then you let your property management company know, and they're like, hey, we've got $15,000 worth of bookings, and you owe us 25% management fee for these, or some sort of penalty, unless the buyer's going to honor these bookings and let us continue to manage for a time period. And I've seen situations like that where that can really mess up a transaction, because the buyer doesn't want to do that. And there's many reasons why the buyer wouldn't want to do that, because they want to start renovations right after closing, or they don't want to subject themselves to a property management company that they're not comfortable with, or whatever. So just make sure that if you're in a situation as a seller and or a buyer, that you do some due diligence on what the situation is there. Keep in mind that as a buyer, you're not really on the hook for anything if unless the seller puts requirements in writing, right? So look at the listing description and make sure your agent checks any private notes or requirements on the listing or in the offer. And arguably, if something's in the listing, setting expectations about that, that may or may not hold up, but generally it's the source of truth is the binding contract, right? So, if the offer doesn't say anything about the buyer being required to honor bookings from the property management company, then you're not on the hook for anything. But if something was not on the offer, but in the listing description, and the seller's in a position where they're subject to some major penalties, it might make for a messy transaction and make it harder to negotiate through the transaction, and ultimately harder to close the transaction. So that's why I say, obviously, what's legally binding is what's in the purchase offer, but what's in the listing description also matters too. So do your due diligence and make sure you have those conversations. For the most part, this is not something that gets in the way of too many transactions in the short-term rental space, but it does happen, and it is it is meaningful in terms of dollars moving around and people's vacations and their experience, and things at stake as well, that we want to be sensitive to as well. So hopefully this helps give you some education on this piece of the process. And again, if I can help you, whether it's in North Georgia or elsewhere in the country, I have many great referral partners, short-term rental focused agents. I've spent a lot of time over the years building strong partnerships with other short-term rental experts in the United States. And I have a lot of good insight into how you approach working with these people and what to look out for and how to analyze deals and things of that nature. So when you come through me and I connect you to the right agent in the right place, you get my support as a coach and consultant and a partner in your analysis. So you get some free resources and some time with me as a part of going through my referral process. And more important than that, that's not really a true focus. It's more just an offering to you if that's helpful. More important than that is just sticking around, looking out for future videos, subscribing here, and keeping me in mind if I can help you in North Georgia. So we have a strong team that that'll sell roughly 25 to 30 million in volume in 2025. And we offer property management services and vendor lists and free coaching and check-in calls to support you in making sure that you're successful in your short-term rental endeavors, whether that's a lake property or a mountain property, or self-managed versus working with property management companies. We can connect you to all the right people and provide the right tools and resources you need to be successful in this asset class. So it's a wonderful place to play and invest, and we're investors ourselves here in the market. So if we can be a resource for you and support you in your journey, we'd love the opportunity. Feel free to book a call at cushmanhomes.com, and we'll talk to you soon.